In an insane world, it was the sanest choice.
Hi everyone, welcome to Priority Holder. Today we'll be playing Grixis Scam in the Timeless format. Now Scam's an archetype where you use like the pitch elementals, get their strong ETBs, and try and rebuy them somehow with like an undying effect, or in this case, Reanimate, to put them back into play and get their effects once again. And so we're using the discard ability of Grief and like the Pyrokinesis ability of Fury to try and get some strong advantages. And double Grief on turn 1 can just win games by itself. However, this deck now has access to Chrome Mox, which can allow some different broken starts, including turn 1 Faithless Looting and turn 1 Reanimate together. And we could put stuff like Sire of Insanity into play, which is like a pseudo turn 1 win, which beginning of each end step, each player discards their hand. So if we can put this into play, make both players discard, maybe the 6-4 will go all the way, and a lot of times that's too much for people. But we also have like a ton of other value things we can do. We have Overlord to like fill up our graveyard and get card advantage. Psychic Frog can run away with games by itself. And Persist to even have more graveyard shenanigans going. So let's go with Scamming. This is a great hand, and this deck has some like basically a ton of decisions to make on your turn 1s, because especially with Chrome Mox you can do a lot of stuff. Like sometimes you can turn 1 Sire of Insanity, or like do you want a Faithless Looting to like try and dig for a Chrome Mox. Like, however, the way I treat this most of the time is like if I can pitch cast Grief and Reanimate it on turn 1, that's what I'm doing. If that's like barring like the Sire of Insanity setup, you know. So we see Plains and Guide of Souls on the other side. Okay, so it's not a typical energy deck. It's some sort of obviously like life gain strategy. Now Ocelot Pride is really bad for us, especially with Guide of Souls already in play. Like they're just gonna go off like crazy. So it feels like we have to take one of the Ocelot Prides and then reanimate our Grief to take the other one. Otherwise, like the cat tokens would be like going crazy, like starting even like turn 2, they'd be going really wild with that. So we're taking a pretty big chunk of life right here, but we're feeling decent about that exchange. And then they drop this enchantment called Assemble the Players, which lets them cast creatures with power 2 less from the top of their deck, which is an incredible card engine. So it's obvious like they've built around this, and we're gonna have a hard time keeping up with that depending on how well like the top of their library treats them. From what we've seen already, like they're going to have a ton of hits for that. So that completely changed the game right there, and now I'm not feeling nearly as good, especially at the bolt in that land. But we do pack Fury, which is incredible against them. So, and unfortunately missed with our first Overlord hit. So the question is, do we grab like Grief and just strip some more stuff out of their hand, or do we like grab a Psychic Frog and start trying to like crash in and draw some more cards? We don't have a blue source. Like it gets a little tricky sometimes. I decide to take one of their cards away with Grief. It's not much, but it's something, and I basically just want to buy time to like till Overlord turns into a creature and can like really find us a Fury. Alright, so they're casting off the top of their deck. They get an Esper Sentinel, and they cast Giver of Runes, which is a big problem that can shield them from the Fury. And thankfully we drew a Fury right in time. So going to pitch cast Fury, and I make a mistake right here. Actually, never mind. It's going to turn. Okay, I'm thinking of something else. Fury's going to cut down their 2 most problematic creatures, and then we'll be able, with their hand empty, we can just cast FOMO and you know, draw another card. So, but we do have to kill them at some point, and like if we give them too much time, they're just going to grind us out with that enchantment. So, play a FOMO and play a land. There is an argument for holding lands for Faithless Looting, but we do need to actually be able to like flash it back. So, so Fury was absolutely clutch there. It was about to get real nasty for us otherwise. Alright, Secluded Step, resetting the top of their deck. Alright, and they found an Ocelot Pride off the top. Let's see if they keep hitting off the top. Okay, no, so they're going to play Speaker. Alright, so we have a good blocker. We don't have any life gain in this deck, so like you do have to be pretty, you have to be mindful of that. Like when you go down, like it's getting tricky. So I opted for the Surveil land there. That notably does not set up a blue source for us for Psychic Frog, so had to be mindful of that. Now, I'm for mana efficiency here, casting Faithless Looting, but it plays right into the Esper Sentinel, which is not ideal. So we have found Sire of Insanity and Chrome Mox. It seems like it's just best at this point just to keep the land. It gets us our blue source. Not to mention putting Chrome Mox in the graveyard gets Delirium set up for FOMO. So I'd be happy with the triple block here because we'd be able to kill like whatever 2 creatures we wanted. And so attacking in, and I think I'm not, with our such a low life total, like we don't want them to like swarm us, especially like Ocelot Pride can really start going wild. I do decide to send in Grief though, because like once again, we do have to kill them at some point. So, alright, so they do accept the trade with the Grief right there. So reasonably happy about that, and just hoping they brick a little bit off their enchantment. Alright, there's another Giver, which is a problem. Alright, then there's a Giver off the top of their deck. Alright, and FOMO is holding off their forces. So now it's finally time to lock up a blue source in case we get a Psychic Frog. And we need, basically we already need another Fury is what it's come down to. Alright, so there's another FOMO, which is pretty great. Like, this is the power of FOMO. Like, you can just, if you're empty-handed, you can just, you know, play it, draw a card. Like, it's already strong without that mode, but like, being able to just draw a card straight up is really great. Going to crash in with FOMO. They don't have any active protection right now, and it's at least like a free attack, and I'll accept a multi-block and like kill like Ocelot Pride or something like that, you know. So it is like, because they can so easily sneak past by just granting mono red, I decide just to leave one of the FOMOs back, but it does leave us open to getting swords or something like that. So there's an Esper Sentinel, and we are at a... Okay, so they have Kabira takedown, which is bad for us. And they're attacking... They're going to get the Ocelot Pride. It does shut down like the protection for a turn. But we are at a really low life total. Now the nice thing is like the last counter is about to come off Overlord. So we are like real close to having that online. And it's going to be a blocker of another color. I'm going to leave back FOMO at this point. Like, our life total is getting a little too low, especially that they can give pro colors and, you know, so it's possible for them to send one creature through our defenses by granting pro red and pro black. Speaker of the Heavens could be problematic if they can somehow muster the life gain to start making angels. And the thing is, like, this is pretty bold from I do like the boldness of it. Like, they got to make something happen, so they're giving it pro red and pro black so that we cannot block it. Ocelot Pride is going to ding us down to 5 and make a cat token. So that's, oh sorry, they already City's Blessing that makes 2 cat tokens. And there's a Grief, but they're empty-handed. But we may, so we know we already have a Fury in the graveyard, so we honestly might need to tuck Grief under a Chrome Mox and hard cast Fury right here. So I'm trying to figure out what kind of attacks to make that won't just kill us right here. So I decide it's reasonably safe to attack with everything. I'm going to untap Overlord and just try and start the Fury train. And in response to that, I'm going to send Psychic Frog to the skies right here, just so we can guarantee the card with it. So here's Overlord's trigger. We're definitely going to grab a Fury, and right now we can hard cast it by tucking Grief under the Chrome Mox. So this is a pretty tough spot for them right here. Alright, so they're just going to double chump, and they're in a real tough spot. I think honestly they should have, you know, threw everyone in front of the Overlord, because now Overlord gets to attack again and put something else into our hand. Now once again, this is like a little risky as far as like exposing ourselves, but yeah, I'm just gonna put another Fury into hand and hope to just start hard casting him. But yeah, if they threw everything in front of the Overlord, they would have been able to take it down and just shut down like our... Because right now Overlord still survived and means we can just keep rebuying Furies. Now we won't be able to pay for Esper Sentinel here, which is bad news. So they get their draw, but it seems worth it to Chrome Mox here instead of cracking a fetch, because it's going to cost us minimum 3 life, and I don't think with all the protection out there that we can afford that. So I'm going to kill the 2 creatures that can allow them to slip through our defenses, the 2 givers. And it's not, well, I guess we could play the land, but we can cast everything we need to, and like we might need to discard the land to Faithless Looting or something like that. So it's sort of a toss-up. It seems unlikely we want to lower our life total any more than that. Okay, Soul Warden plus Guide of Souls. Now here's the problem here is that and they have a Sarah Ascendant off the top. So now they're recouping all that life, but more dangerously, they actually have enough energy to send something to the sky. So they're trying to decide between Ocelot Pride and Speaker of the Heavens. And they opted to place the counters on Speaker because it can gain... Well, it has Vigilance, so it's still back as a blocker. So we fall to 2. And now they're really going off with Guide of Souls and Soul Warden. And they're getting dangerously close to Speaker activations, which would be devastating for us. So this is where it all comes down to right here. Like, how do we proceed? They have all this stuff in play. We have to have like a blocker for Speaker, or it's going to kill us. Not to mention that Guide of Souls must die this turn, or else it's creating another flying creature. Plus, we have to keep the life total down low enough so Sarah Ascendant doesn't gain flying as well. So I opt to kill Sarah Ascendant, Guide of Souls, and Ocelot Pride here. Guide of Souls is the most problematic one, but Ocelot Pride, you know, it can just keep supplying them chump blockers and stuff like that, and it can eventually make them swarm over us. So gonna lead with a hard cast Fury to open things up. Now it's a question of how to attack. So definitely attacking with Overlord and FOMO. FOMO has to attack in order to give the like sort of extra combat untap thing. And by attacking with these 2, we can put a Fury into our hand. And if Overlord gets to attack again, we can put a pitch card into our hand and deal even more damage. So we're definitely putting a Fury into hand. And then waiting to see how they block. So the opponent... Despite the lopsided life totals, this is a pretty tough spot, and they honestly should be killing the Overlord here. However, they just chump it, which, you know, allowing the double Overlord attacks is really tough when we have Furies in the graveyard. And so now I'm realizing that Fury post-combat is going to be able to clean everything up with the damage that Speaker has already taken. So I'm able to go, you know, even more crazy on this attack right here. And the opponent is just in a real tough spot. Like, they've been grinding super well with their enchantment. So yeah, so now they're finally going to kill the Overlord, but the damage has already been done. And trying to decide if I should pitch stuff into Psychic Frog at this point. Probably could have pitched the land into Psychic Frog, deal an extra point of damage and grow it a little bit. And there's a Persist. So definitely pitch casting Fury just to clean up the rest of their board. And the 2 Furies and an active Psychic Frog are going to clean things up pretty quickly, unless they get some like incredible chain off their enchantment. But Soul Warden is buffering their life total with these Furies and stuff like that. But we're feeling pretty decent right here. We have a Persist for good measure. Like, all right, they probably drew a land, and okay, the opponent packs it in. So that was like an amazing grind out battle against mono white. So awesome win, and we're on to the next game against a Lurrus deck. All right, we're going first, and once again, like if I can scam them turn 1, then I'm going to. Wanting to hold on to the second land for turn 2 Psychic Frog. So holding on to like Fell the Profane, and that's it. So I love scan decks, like, and you know, those are the kind. Sometimes you get free wins like that. Other times you can grind out games. This deck, I think, it's really capable of both. Like, it can get the turn 1 win, and it can also grind grind the opponents to dust with like endless fury recursion and stuff like that. So Shambling Ghast on the other side of the battlefield likely means it's one of those mono black combo decks that's trying to loop a bunch of those die into treasure creatures and stuff like that. Though they are sometimes a part of like storm decks, not necessarily like the full-fledged creature-based versions. So starting off with the Grief, and we have the Reanimate for turn 1. So we're definitely going to take the most potent creatures. So Bowmasters is pretty strong. We have a decent amount of card draw, like Faithless Lootings and FOMOs and stuff. And going to Reanimate Grief and take the Marionette also, which can be problem. Like that's part of like the combo that they can often set up. And we have 2 Furies locked and loaded, so we're hoping that they just empty their hand and we can just massacre them by pitch casting Fury. So as the opponent starts casting their stuff, please Kazazikar the like button, and let's see if I can actually pronounce that. So the opponent attacks, and we're definitely not blocking there because they can minus down the Fury, and they're going to play their other creatures like we thought. And alright, so we got the pitch cast Fury here. And this is actually a mistake. So I pitch Faithless Looting to it. I should just pitch Fury, because we're going to play land FOMO and it's going to discard our final card. And we'd much rather have Faithless Looting in the graveyard. 1, because it contributes to Delirium. 2, because it has flashback. So that was just an oversight by me, which could actually matter. Like, sometimes you need every bit of sort of card selection you can. So with the 2 Shambling Ghast, they kill our Grief, but we're reasonably okay with that. And the tough thing is that we don't have that Faithless Looting in the graveyard, which could actually matter. So gonna run out FOMO and pitch the Fury, and we drew a land. So let's see if the opponent has any followers. So they're greedy freebooter. So we spent a lot of life to gain the advantage that we have, and I'm going to crack a fetch here to try and set up Delirium. So Raucous Theater and another Fury, which we're still like 2 lands away from casting. So I'm just going to bin it. Like, really would love like an Overlord of the Balemurk, and since we didn't hit Delirium, we probably shouldn't. Well, okay, I guess we could attack because you know, they have like a 1/1, and we have so many live hits like Psychic Frog and other stuff like that. So it does allow them to scry, but it does seem like we got to kill them at some point, or else they can just set up the combo again. Alright, Chrome Mox is a brick, though if we can discard it at some point, it can set up Delirium for FOMO. So I'm going to just crash in. And alright, so opponent just passing again, so it's like, are they holding removal, or are they just hitting like useless stuff right now? Just gonna grab a tap land, and they pass to us, and there's a Grief. Perfect. Alright, so that allows us to apply more pressure and take a look at what's going on over there. And they might be holding like a Bowmasters or something like that. And there's a Bowmasters. Okay, so they could have set up like an ambush block situation to kill the FOMO. Alright, and they only have a Phyrexian Tower back in hand. So going to attack with the FOMO, and they decide just to chump with the creature. I was very surprised about that, like that they're so cautious with their life total at this point. There's an Overlord of the Balemurk, which is excellent. So decide to do it pre-combat, because we can set up Delirium and it'll make our attacks a lot stronger. So gonna Overlord, and it seems like FOMO is the best choice here, because we can play it, pitch the Chrome Mox, set up Delirium, and get a new draw right here. So feeling pretty good about this situation, and it's a Sire of Insanity. Now, this is playing right into Orcish Bowmasters, so like that is not without cost, especially us being at such a low life total. But I'm trying to hurry and close the game here, so attacking with FOMO and Grief, and they decide to trade with the FOMO, which perfectly fine with because we have a spare FOMO, and Grief's going to get another attack in right here, and so we can put them to 14, and we're getting pretty close to closing it out. So we've taken so many resources from them, like it's going to take a miracle for them to like assemble enough to come back. All right, there's a Faithless Looting. It seems way too risky to cast it at this point. Like, let's say they flash in a Bowmasters, like that just gives them like way too much life, way too much action to possibly come back into this game. So, gonna cruise in with Grief and FOMO, and hold off on the Faithless Looting. And Overlord's creeping towards being a creature, so let's see if we can. And this is the beauty of Scam, is like you can neuter opponents' strategies right from the turn 1, and then like they sort of have like a really, their deck can sort of limp along if you take away all their good stuff. So, all right, this hand is close to greatness. So we, but it didn't have enough mana. So keeping this Chrome Mox, I'm gonna put one of the Chrome Moxes back because we don't want to spend that many cards. But we'll have to see how it goes. All right, fetch land from the opponent, and we're getting griefed. So that's pretty unfortunate. Be very curious to see what they take from us. And they have their eye on Overlord. That's actually really bad news because that might mean they want to reanimate that. Okay, thankfully they didn't reanimate it. So now what? We could turn 1 of FOMO, but that's like at the cost of one of our cards. It seems better to just Faithless Looting right here. If we had like one, like, yeah, I don't know. We don't really know enough about what the opponent's doing, so I decide just to Faithless Looting here. Try and set something up. All right, Persist and FOMO. Persist on the Overlord could be pretty good, but we also, like, yeah, this is tough. Like, do we keep the Fury? Do we keep the Chrome Mox? Decide just to pitch Chrome Mox and FOMO, and just go for the land like Overlord next turn, or land FOMO, for example. We still have the availability to pitch cast Fury. All right, so it's a black-white Surveil land on the other side of the battlefield. Once again, this deck has like a lot of decision points that are not always obvious. And then we drew another Chrome Mox. So I'm trying, we have no idea what we're up against right now. And decide, like, bringing back Overlord is a ton of value. Like, there is risk, like the opponent's playing white, so like they could have like a really clean answer to Overlord. But it's going to get us some value no matter what, like by just getting in play at all. And so the question is, do we grab Grief or do we grab like another FOMO? I end up grabbing Grief right here just because we're getting somewhat close to being able to cast it. And trying to decide if you, because the opponent is running hand disruption, so like, okay, so they do have the swords, which sucks, but that's how it goes. And waiting to see what else the opponent has. They're passing, and so they could have any number of things. They could have mana drain up. They could have. So I'm checking out the graveyard, trying to get a better understanding. At least some sort of scam deck, since they have Grief over there. And decide, all right, this is probably worth it to Chrome Mox away FOMO or Fury in order to hard cast a Grief. Decide just to stick Fury under there and to Grief them. Alright, so the opponent has a response. And alright, so sink into stupor. So thankfully that wasn't like a pitch cast one. Like, it does set us back a little bit. Oh, and that's tough. So they reanimate Overlord. Okay, so now it makes sense that this is an Esper Ketramos deck. So basically like Esper Scam, and they have an Abhorrent Oculus. That was enabled by our own Overlord, and now we're pretty much toast. We have no clean answer for Oculus. Like, our main way of dealing with stuff is Fury, and it deals damage in increments of 4, which is not enough. So yeah, that's basically it. So that was a tough one. And we're moving on to the next game. this one looks, so it's a pretty costly turn 1 scam. Like, we'd have to get rid of a Psychic Frog bar. Okay, so it's just land. So in order to scam them, we have to pitch the Psychic Frog, and then we'd be left with nothing else in hand. So I'm trying to decide, like, do I just want to just get one look with the Reanimate and still turn to a Psychic Frog, or like, is it worth it enough to go for the full scam right here? So Reanimate, I'm leaving the Reanimate in hand just to go for the full scam. And like, this better be okay. So it's show and tell that we're playing against, and I'm very shocked that they did not brainstorm in response and hide some of the spells. So I'm going to take the brainstorm. That way they can't protect themselves against round 2 when we reanimate it. So once again, I'm really shocked they didn't, because often they'll brainstorm, tuck away their most important stuff from like hand disruption. But now we're able to steal the brainstorm. I'm going to just jump back in there with grief and take the yeah, that's it for the opponent. So another reason to love scam is hunting show and tell. So all right, this hand is close to greatness. It's a Chrome Mox away from a turn 1 Sire of Insanity. And this must just be a nightmare scenario as the opponent seeing Thoughtseize. So what they should take is Faithless Looting, because that's our means of getting Sire into the graveyard. But they take a Reanimate. And I don't know if they're trying to like trick us into Faithless Looting and then they reanimate Sire on their turn. Like, that could be like what they're going for. However, we draw the Chrome Mox, so making sure I carefully discard the correct stuff. But barring like a surgical extraction, this is going to be an absolute massacre for them. So making sure Sire ends up in the graveyard and going to Chrome Mox, tuck Psychic Frog under it. Honestly, maybe could have tucked Grief, but anyway, we're going to reanimate Sire. And this is the stuff dreams are made of right here. Turn 1 Sire, empty their hand, and the game looks a lot more bleak from their perspective at this point. And yeah, that's going to be enough. So happy to showcase a turn 1 Sire victory right there. So many of these games have been like really close, like one Chrome Mox away or one Faithless Looting away or one Sire. Like, anyway, you play the deck enough, you're going to get some turn 1s. So the opponent has like an extreme mulligan, but seeing the MDFC makes you realize that they're on some sort of combo deck, and that's like the cost of doing business sometimes when you're running combo. So here's the question: do we grief on turn 1 and then persist it on turn 2? And I'm really tempted because it's like pretty clear they're a combo deck. But just decide to Faithless Looting, and as low as I am to like get rid of our Overlord, because that could like get us some more action. We have all lands in hand. I'm going to grief them right here because they mulliganed a lot and they're in a vulnerable spot, and they kept a whammy of a hand. So Balustrade, Spy, and Reanimate. So definitely gonna take the Reanimate because they could hit our Overlord, or they could grab our own grief, and then anyway it could get really nasty. So I've seen different versions with the Balustrade Spy. So sometimes it's with a Goblin Charbelcher build, like Balustrade Spy it's like a backup plan, like with Thassa's Oracle, you can empty your library, stuff like that. I've also seen it in like a dredge build where they're just trying to Balustrade Spy, deck themselves, put a ton of stuff into play. So basically what I'm saying is we have to proceed with caution, because Balustrade Spy is obviously dangerous in their graveyard as well, since they're rocking Reanimates. But it's dangerous in their hand because they could eventually like potentially hard cast it. So the opponent is in a tough spot, but it doesn't mean like we can let our defenses down. So I'm trying to figure out what to do. Just trying to get some more information. Going to cast the Persist and bring back our grief that we have, just to try and like disrupt them a little bit more. All right, so they found a second Balustrade Spy, and they also have a Silver Smoke Ghoul. So this is obviously like the sort of dredge version of the Balustrade Spy deck, and really trying to get some more stats into play to like close things out. All right, so there's the Chrome Mox, and once again, like I said, it's dangerous to leave them in their hand as well. If you know, they just need to rip a couple more lands, then all of a sudden they're playing the Spy, but there's a risk of putting it in the graveyard also because that makes Reanimate a live draw. So the question here is like, do we grief them and try and deny them like the hard cast Spy? So I'm not sure, like, are they, I'm not certain if that deck also runs like Persist, you know, or if they're just rocking Reanimates. Not exactly sure how they're configured, but I opt to just hard cast Grief at this point for two reasons. One, we need more stats on the battlefield just to kill them, and it just denies them the hard cast. So if they rip some lands, like, they're still a ways off. Alright, so the opponent passes to us. Now, I have not been pitching cards into Psychic Frog. Maybe I should have at certain points. So, anyway, it just hasn't felt like we've had many surplus cards to put into it. But the thing is, every card on earlier turns you put into Psychic Frog just sort of accelerates the kill that much more, you know. So, all right, we have Grief and Reanimate. Now, the reason I've been hesitant is that we could try and Balustrade Spy, like Reanimate it and try and deck them. However, I've played against this deck before, and they often have some safeguards against decking themselves, like Progenitus or World Spine Worm, that reshuffle in, you know, so like they have some safeguards usually. So that's why I'm not trying to like deck them. And yeah, the opponent just packs in a week. They had one last turn to rip a Reanimate, and they didn't find it. So mulliganing that hand, and this looks pretty good. We'll have to get rid of a card, but yeah, just gonna get rid of a land. Gonna start with the turn one Faithless Looting and just, well, I guess we could grief them. But the nice thing about Faithless Looting is that we could find like a card where we'd more like to pitch into grief than the Overlord, because we'd like to cast the Overlord if possible. Alright, it's just two more lands though. So question is, do you, against non-companion deck, like no information, do we grief them, or do we just hold on? It seems better just to hold on. Like, we don't have enough information. If we knew it was a combo deck, like what it looks like it might be right here, might have gone for it. So Chrome Mox grabbing Brainstorm, and they're passing. So it's unclear what the opponent has. They could have a mana drain right here, so it is risky to like cast something with too high of a mana value, because it could, who knows what it could unleash on the other side. So like, let's say we pitch cast a Grief right here, and they mana drain it, like that could be really bad for us. So it seems better just to play a FOMO into potential counterspell. It's just less dangerous if it gets mana drained, and we still don't have that much information. So it does eat a mana drain, which is unfortunate. And it's at this point I decide, all right, it's probably worth it to grief them, even though we get rid of like our sort of card advantage engine in Overlord. All right, so the opponent kept a very like reactive hand. So they have Dark Ritual, mana drain. We're just gonna leave them with a Dark Ritual, even though that is risky. We're just hoping they just don't draw anything nice. So they're gonna play a Shockland, and they found something that's worth Dark Ritualing, and it's a Liliana of the Veil. I'm just like, oh my gosh. I spent so many resources trying to hamstring them, and they end up with the Liliana in play. So, I mean, this is great. We draw a Psychic Frog, but that's just going to force them to -2 Liliana. And so, that was like an amazing draw from them, and it knocked the Fury out of her hand, and they're just going to eat the Psychic Frog. So, now the thing is, our deck is rocking 4 copies of Reanimate and 4 copies of Persist, and so there's one right there. So that will at least allow us to pull up a Fury and kill the Liliana of the Veil. Hopefully don't have an immediate answer to Fury. Alright, so they're brainstorming, looking for a counterspell or a surgical right here. So I'm like, please no mana drain, please no mana drain, please no mana drain. And the opponent's thinking about the ordering. And it lands. Okay, so thankfully we get to kill Liliana of the Veil and just stop that value train right there. So the Fury will kill them pretty quick if they don't have an answer for it. So they land, they pass. Faithless Looting is a little risky. Like, this is the kind of deck that could play Orcish Bowmasters. So Just going to crash in with Fury, and we don't have any spare cards right now to discard for Faithless Looting, so we definitely have to hold on. Alright, so the opponent passes again, and we have a Persist, so we could like pre-combat Persist a Grief into play, or maybe even like a Psychic Frog, like just to try and get some more threats. So it's not clear what the right decision is. Anyway, it is clear we should attack with Fury, so we're going to crash in with Fury. And I'm agonizing here, like, alright, do I grab like FOMO, or do I grab like Psychic Frog, or do we go for Grief? Like, there's an argument to be made for every single one of those. So I decided to attempt to Persist Grief, and they have another manager. Okay, so they haven't shown a good means of being able to use that mana, and the opponent falls to 2 right here. So I'm like, okay, after some back and forths, it feels like we're finally getting there. And they found another Liliana the Veil. I'm just like, oh no, like after all that, once again, they find a way to get out of it. And then now we're facing an active Planeswalker again. So, and then we find Overlord of the Balemurk. I'm like, okay. So by impending it right here, we can guaranteed pick up a Fury, which we already know we have in the graveyard, and we have the Faithless Looting still in hand, so we can just pitch cast it, but that puts us down to like 0 cards in hand. However, just by spiking some lands, we can escape Kroxa, so it seems worth it. Like, you know, we just don't want to let them keep Liliana the Veil and just start emptying our hand. Like, we're just going to use our resources, take care of Lily, and keep the battle going. So we're left with an Overlord that's ticking down. And it's just been a crazy back and forth so far. And another Reanimate. So we could attempt the kill right now by reanimating Kroxa and praying they don't have a well, I guess they probably... Anyway, it's sort of a gamble. So I decided just to reanimate Grief, and boy, I'm glad I did. They have Nicol Bolas Dragon God, which was super close to being able to be cast against us, which would have been an absolute nightmare to deal with. And if you can actually believe it, I had that card in this deck in earlier iterations. Mostly because we have so many ways to like pitch it to Chrome Mox or discard to Faithless Looting. Like if it sucks, we can get rid of it, but it can take over games when we need it. Ended up wanting to increase the creature density for all the persisting and the reanimating and stuff like that. But anyway, let me know in the comments like if you want to see me try like a Grixis Super Friends deck. So, but the fight continues on right now. Our Overlord's ticking down. We're gonna grab our Surveillant. FOMO is awesome, and the opponent packs it in. So that was a close back and forth battle against Grixis Super Friends, but we pull it out in the end, and we're on to the next game. Question is, turn 2 Psychic Frog or Overlord? Alright, so turn 1 Faithless Looting on the other side. So, and then we see Strike It Rich and Collected Brutality hit the bin, so it's likely a Phoenix deck that we're playing against. We don't have any turn 1 plays though, so... Alright, so the opponent's going to Grief us, so maybe it's not quite a Phoenix deck, it could be a scam build. Alright, so they're taking Psychic Frog, which I was sort of surprised to see. Like, you know, Psychic Frog is potent, but they're actually going to reanimate the Psychic Frog. I guess our hand doesn't line up super well against Psychic Frog, so it actually was an amazing choice by them, because, you know, if we slam an Overlord, then the coast is clear for Psychic Frog. If we slam FOMO, well, they can just pitch some cards into Psychic Frog and then kill it in combat. So, I'm a little worried about putting an Overlord in the graveyard in case they have another Reanimate. So, but at the same time, like, we would love to persist one of those in play potentially. So I am going to put it in the graveyard, even though there is a pretty strong risk of doing so. But you can't play scared, you know, like. So they're attacking in, and this is me weighing, like, we don't want them drawing more cards, and so this is basically, this block is like a functional discard 2, and they're gonna kill our creature, but it seems worth it because they seem to be mana screwed, and like denying them card draw is pretty nice. Alright, so they got rid of a Dark Ritual and a Strike It Rich, and they pass. Okay, so that was pretty nice. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, Psychic Frog plus Reanimate, let's do this. However, the mana color, so that's the reason I'm bolting in this land right here, is like, alright, Psychic Frog plus Reanimate, but then like, or maybe I was going to do Kroxa plus Reanimate. Problem is we only have one black source, and so he took 3 damage for no reason, which is like a pretty big mistake, especially when their Psychic Frog is already that huge. So we bolt ourselves for no reason and play our own Psychic Frog and move on with our lives. But that was an unforced error for sure. So they're going to crash with Psychic Frog. We're not going to block because they can outsize ours by pitching cards. So they do unfortunately get to draw a card, Faithless Looting. Hopefully, you know, the opponent's hoping to find a land eventually. And they put Saint Elenda and an Arc-like Phoenix in the graveyard. So on high alert now, and in a Thoughtseize, just gonna let it happen. And this is an interesting battle now because they have a lot of crazy draws, and we have some we have a pretty stacked hand still. All right, so they're taking Reanimate from us, and they're passing to us. So this is showdown of the Psychic Frogs right here. But they don't even have a Psychic Frog in their deck, presumably. They're just borrowing one of ours to try and take us down. So they have 1 card left, and it seems worth it to pitch cast Grief. We want to still be able to persist something. And they can just feed it to the Psychic Frog. Like, we know that's going to happen. Oh, okay, so they don't feed it. They Surgical Extraction the Overlord. Now, Overlord is pretty strong this matchup, so I decide to give Psychic Frog flying to deny them basically extracting all the Overlords out of our deck. So like this will get rid of one of them. I don't know if that was the correct play though, because we have a Kroxa in hand, and that just emptied 2 cards out of our graveyard that would have still been there otherwise for escaping it potentially. So I don't know if that was the correct call by me. Like, I think I was just getting too cute, like, oh, I can deny them the surgical. Well, we want cards in the graveyard for Kroxa. So now the question is, and I'm making sure I know what's going on in their graveyard. Do we persist a Grief into play? That'll only be a 2/1. I decide definitely going to cast Kroxa because it's going to be a deal 3. They don't have any cards in hand, so they're going to take 3, fall to 8, and then now we're faced with a tough choice. Like, do we like persist the Grief or persist Kroxa or hold off? It's a really tough situation right here. And as we're thinking about that, let me know in the comments, like, what are your favorite discard outlets? Is it Psychic Frog? Is it FOMO? Is it Wild Mongrel? Let me know what you like to set up your Reanimator shenanigans with. You can see me like really agonizing here because, you know, bringing back Grief right now puts more stats into play but doesn't take any cards from their hand, but would also require 3 points of life loss since we don't have any basics. And the opponent's going to crash in Psychic Frog. They just played a land pre-combat, and now we're at 9, they're at 8. Alright, so they're going to flash back a Strike at Rich just to try and get some more mana production. I'm going to grab a Surveil land here off the Scalding Tarn, of which we only have 1, so get the Raucous Theater. And Reanimate seems pretty strong right here. Now, I think... so we're so close. I take a long time on this turn because if we attack with Psychic Frog, we deal 1 damage, but we can also bring Kroxa back into play 2 times and deal 6. So, but that's just not quite enough to actually kill them. And so I'm trying to decide what to reanimate, because like, let's say a Reanimate like a Grief, well then they just crash with Psychic Frog and kill us, you know. So I decide ultimately to try and reanimate Saint Elenda. However, the opponent can do the same trick we did, and they just deny us the reanimate. So we at least took it out of their graveyard, but would have been nice to put that into play for sure. So we're going to crash in Psychic Frog, Chrome Mox. So now it's like, okay, do we bring back Grief or Kroxa? It seems prudent to get rid of that last card in hand. So we're going to persist the Grief into play. And we want the stats into place. So they can just feed it to the Psychic Frog, which they're doing right now. They're just activating it. And it's another Saint Elenda, so if they find another Reanimate, though I guess they don't have enough life to reanimate Saint Elenda at the very least. So super close battle. Their frog is way bigger than ours. Alright, so they're going to Faithless Looting. So the question is, how do we actually kill them at this point? The nice thing about the Psychic Frog Kroxa interaction is that we can pitch cards to like put enough stuff in the graveyard through Psychic Frog. Alright, so they're going to deny us the possible chump block right here. So they're going to give Psychic Frog flying, crash in. They're going to put us to 4. So we're going to have one more turn. Once again, our only means of dealing with creatures is creature combat and Furies, and this Psychic Frog outgrew Fury some time ago. Okay, so we drew a Reanimate. We have 3 points of damage on board. So can we kill them? Well, we actually have 4 points because we can pitch a card to Psychic Frog, pitch a Chrome Mox. So we're going to attack in, and this is definitely not a guaranteed kill right here. But we're going to pitch into Psychic Frog, attack them, and we get to draw a card, thankfully. But we can reanimate Kroxa, and the opponent just packs it in. So they must have had like a land in hand or something like that and would have just died to Kroxa trigger. So what an amazing grind out battle against Phoenix, and our Psychic Frog did a lot of work against us. Alright. Potential super strong hand right here. Gonna lead it Faithless Looting. We don't have any like nifty turn 1 stuff. Like if we had a Reanimate instead of Persist, then we could have done like the turn 1 Grief scam. But we don't, so it seems better to just be patient. And I guess maybe I should have pitched a Chrome Mox here. Though it can like get us like a hard cast Grief ahead of schedule. I don't know, I end up pitching the lands, but I could see like pitching Chrome Mox in 1 land and just playing it a little slower. So once again, like there's so many decisions you have to make that it gets sort of tricky at times. Alright, Overlord is pretty nice. Still don't know anything about what the opponent's doing. So do we just play a Psychic Frog, or do we try and like, you know, because we could scam them right now by hitting them with Grief and then persisting the Grief. And it seems pretty like it's very costly though as far as cards, you know, so you could see me agonizing like, alright, which one's better for us long term? Decide probably Psychic Frog's better longer term. So we're going to attempt to Grief them. Now this opponent came prepared. They have a Brainstorm response. They're gonna be able to protect their hand from like a truly devastating Grief scam right here. So they've shielded themselves, and so we got to see what's left for us to take. And what's left is like an insanely strong hand against us. So I'm checking the graveyard right here. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, so if I just start taking cards to them, that's just gonna turn on Oculus super fast. And they have like a fetch land also, so it's a nightmare scenario. If we had a Reanimate, like we could try and put an Oculus in the graveyard, Reanimate, but Persist only hits our own graveyard. And so they have Fetch plus Fatal Push, so I decide just to take the Fatal Pushes. And the thing is, there's 2 mystery cards they put on top of their deck, so I'm like, there's a reasonable chance that there's a Reanimate among one of those. And so if we just put an Oculus in their graveyard, we could be doing their work for them. So that's why I'm not hitting the Oculuses. It is incredibly unfortunate though, but the opponent has just an absolutely stacked hand. Now if I knew for certain, like let's say they didn't cast Brainstorm and I saw that hand, I might just go for the 2 Oculuses and just pray they don't hit a Reanimate anytime soon. But they have so much time, you know, with like double Fatal Push, double Sink into Stupor, and they rip a Psychic Frog. which is almost as good as a Reanimate, since it's crazy strong and can just dump a bunch of cards in the graveyard to enable an Oculus. So that is pretty bad, making me wish that we'd grabbed the Oculuses, but it's looking pretty grim right here. And as good as this deck has been in a lot of matchups, it seems like the sort of like Ketramos or like the Oculus style decks are pretty decent vulnerability. Like, we don't have any answers to like Ketramos or Oculus. Psychic Frog can be problematic, as we saw last game. The opponent almost soloed us with only Psychic Frog. So it's pretty tough. They're gonna crash with Psychic Frog. They're gonna get the Oculus trigger. I don't really know how we can get ourselves out of this. Unless we like can amass a bunch of cards and go crazy with Psychic Frog. But the thing is, like, Oculus is such a beast though. Like, we can't really like crash through it very easily. Not to mention, we put all those counters on Psychic Frog. They just bounce it later with Sink into Stupor. So it's looking pretty bleak. Basically our only hope right now is Attack with Grief. They double block, and they had an Oculus under the face down card that we can reanimate, and then maybe we can like claw back into this. But the thing is, they could just Sink into Stupor their own Oculus back to their hand, and then recant, so, and it was just a spell pierce under there. So I'm fighting the good fight, but it's increasingly bleak for us. And I think this is just a tough matchup. They're basically like a scam deck that is really good against what we're trying to do, and yeah, we're just gonna pack it in. Well, that was super nice. I love scam decks, and I'm always tinkering with different versions of it. I've like tried so many different iterations. There's a lot of different color combinations you can lean into, but this one feels pretty dang strong. Like, not only can you get like more consistent grief scams thanks to Chrome Mox, but you can also whammy them with Sire of Insanity on turn 1, and like, it's just an awesome build. And we can grind people out also with like Overlord. You saw us like grind out those games as well, and Psychic Frog can solo people on its own. So a lot of good things going on in here, and you could see there's a lot of stuff in consideration because we have like a pseudo reanimator theme, and so there's a lot of cards to consider because of that. And I did mention in the games that I actually was running Nicol Bolas Dragon God in this deck at one point, because we have so many profitable ways to get rid of it if it's bad, and it's just like a mid-range hammer if you need it to be. But I just wanted to increase like creature density for like our reanimation spell, so I ended up getting cut. But there is something there, and there's also like the creature version if you wanted to go that route. So because of Persist, it makes the legendary reanimation targets less ideal. Like Sauron the Dark Lord or like Atali Primal Conqueror, like they're pretty strong, but then there's only half our reanimator spells can even hit them. So then you can look at the non-legendary things like Crabomination, the Red Overlord, Trumpeting Carnosaur, Scholar Lost Trove, and maybe even like something like Shroud Stomper or Ashen Rider. So, but I ended up going for like a more mid-rangey lean on it. Like basically Sire of Insanity is like our only like whammy card, and everything else can like fight pretty good mid-range battles, and it seemed to serve us pretty well. So anyway, love Scam, and that's the deck. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to see even more nonsense, please consider subscribing. And if you're already subscribed, thank you for your support. Your engagement with the channel helps me know what the people want. Thank you.